Welcome back to the I Can Do Anything podcast. My name is Colin, and today I'm going to be talking about the most recent NBA headlines because I can do anything. Starting off the headlines was Oladipo's season-ending injury last night. The video wasn't all that gruesome necessarily, maybe in comparison to like Paul George's injury from years ago, the Kevin Ware injury in the March Madness tournament from even more years ago. But just the scream that he let out when he looked at his knee. I forgot the Gordon Hayward injury from last season, but just the scream that he let out as he looked at his knee when he pulled his knee pad down was scary. You really couldn't see necessarily what he was seeing, but the injury wasn't necessarily, it really wasn't that gruesome looking. But I just feel for Victor Oladipo. I put him in the Thursday MVP matrix again this week, but if he's out for the season, he's obviously not going to win an MVP. He wasn't finishing really even in the top 10 in my MVP matrix standings, but he will remain out of the MVP matrix for the rest of the season, obviously. The other headline was Harden having a career-high 61 points at Madison Square Garden. Let's pull up the box score from that game. I talked last week about Harden having 50 and 60-point games and just not really garnering like NBA fans or basketball fans in general's attention. Like, obviously we're paying attention to what he's doing right now because it's a pretty historic scoring run, but I just don't, like, maybe he's normalizing such high volume scoring, and maybe we're just not appreciating it, or maybe I'm not necessarily appreciating it for what it is. Like, obviously 61 points in a game is impressive. And maybe because he's doing it so often, we're like, oh, it's just another game. But I don't know. It's just not all. It's like normally you'd watch a 61 point, you'd see that someone scored 61 points, and you'd be like, oh shit, I got to check that out, you know. But let's see. So the box score: he played 40 minutes, 61 points, 17 of 38 from the field. That is so many fucking shots. 44% from the field, 5 of 20 from 3, 25%. He took 25 free throws, 15 rebounds, 4 assists, 5 turnovers, so a pretty poor assist-to-turnover ratio. It's just not, I don't know, man. It's just not fun to watch. He took 38 shots. Eric Gordon, the next closest, took 15. The next closest, Kenneth Faried, who Dob and I in a previous episode talked about being on the Nets and being completely irrelevant, has since been traded to the Rockets and is starting at center. So that's kind of a new look for the Rockets. I don't think he'll start once there's I can't think of his name. The guy that got paid a shit ton of money that probably shouldn't have gotten paid as much money as he did. Their normal starting center. What the hell is his name? It doesn't matter. He probably won't start the rest of the season. Starting at center won't happen. PJ Tucker they got right now at the 4. I don't see PJ Tucker coming out of the starting lineup. Maybe you bump Austin Rivers out of the starting lineup. He's starting at point guard right now, so maybe you bump Austin Rivers out of the starting lineup once what's his name comes back, and then you go Harden at the 1, Eric Gordon at the 2, Tucker at the 3, Kenneth Faried at the 4, and then homeboy whose name is still escaping me at the 5. But I don't know, these Harden 61-point games, like, this is his career high, the most he's scored, obviously, in his career and obviously this season. But, you know, just this run that he's been on, maybe he's normalizing this high volume scoring, or maybe watching somebody take 23s and 38 total shots, maybe that's just not very fun. 25 free throws. The next closest free throw attempts on the team was Kenneth Faried with 4 attempts and James Ennis with 4 attempts. No one on New York took more than 6 free throw attempts. No one on New York took more than 18 shots. Alonzo Trier took 18 shots. Tim Hardaway Jr. took 16 shots. Kevin Knox took 16 shots. I just saw today that the Knicks have put Courtney Lee, Enes Kanter, and Tim Hardaway Jr. on the trading block. In other trading block news, the Memphis Grizzlies last week at some point, maybe I want to say it was last Thursday, maybe it was Sunday. It was when I was recording a podcast, so it was either last Sunday or the last Thursday. But they put Mark Gasol in the trading block, and now Mike Conley Jr. is on the trading block. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with those two guys. The Grizzlies have certainly kind of fallen off. They had a really good start to the year. They were in the top, I want to say they were in the top maybe 4th place or something like that in the West at one point in the season, and now they're 300.396 win percentage. They're second to last, 19-29. While I've got the standings up, Milwaukee is still overall first. The Raptors are overall second, and then the Golden State Warriors are overall third. The Warriors are first, Denver second, and Oklahoma City third in the West, followed by Portland, Houston, San Antonio, and Utah to round out the top 8. Utah has climbed back into contention. They've got a playoff spot now after a really slow start, and that was kind of expected just due to their schedule that they had early on in the season. Houston has surged up in the standings. Portland continues to play really well and kind of fly under the radar. That leads into quite nicely into the Portland Trailblazers and Oklahoma City game from a couple nights ago. Let me pull up the box score from that game. There was a lot of talk back and forth between Russell Westbrook and basically the entire Blazers team. The last time they played before this past game on Tuesday, that the Thunder won 123-114. Yusuf Nurkic and Russell Westbrook had a little exchange, and then they, in post-game press conferences or maybe on Twitter or something like that, they kind of went back and forth. And then this game, coming just a short time after, there was a lot of talk back and forth. At the free throw line, Damian Lillard was taking free throws late in the game, down by like 6 or 7 or something like that. And I think, what did Russ say to him? He said, "I've been owning you," or something like that for the last several years, or something along those lines. And he's kind of got a point. He's kind of right. This week in the MVP matrix, he finished, well, I didn't accumulate the entire standings for the MVP matrix. I just did the top 6, but neither were in the top 6. Last week, Westbrook tied for 8th with Embiid and Simmons, and Damian Lillard was 11th, and his overall MVP matrix point total was 20 points lower or higher, depending on which way you look at it. But he was 20 points lower than Russell Westbrook. So I don't know. I mean, Westbrook has won MVPs. They've both really not been all that successful in the playoffs, but when Westbrook had Durant, he was a lot more successful, obviously, than the Blazers ever have been in the playoffs. So Westbrook does have a point. I like Damian Lillard far better than I do Russell Westbrook. So looking at the box score, Lillard had 34 points on 50% shooting, 12 of 24, and Russell Westbrook had 29 points. And so 34 points to 29 points, and Westbrook was less efficient, 9 of 20, 45% from the field. He was 1 of 4 from 3. Damian Lillard was pretty bad from 3, 2 of 10 from 3. Lillard had 8 assists, and Westbrook had 14 assists. I mean, overall, the Thunder won. So, that's the that's the objective. You're trying to win the game. But Paul George has played really great the last, I don't know, month, I guess, probably. 36 points on Tuesday, 10 of 21 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3, 4 assists, 5 fucking steals. Those two guys are actually in this week's MVP matrix. They were in last week's too, but those two guys were on top of the MVP matrix, first and second, Westbrook, George in steals per game. So it's really a really good combination for the Thunder, and certainly a part of the reason why they're so high in the standings, because those two are playing really well. But leading the league, I would assume. I don't know if those two are the top 2 in the league, but my assumption is that they're probably both in the top 5 in steals in the league, if not top 2 in the league in steals. But looking around the NBA and some other games from the past week. Last night, the Raptors and the Pacers, that was Oladipo's injury. The Celtics blew out the Cavs 123-103. Terry Rozier had a big night, 26 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. I'm not going to really talk about that game very much. The Rockets beat the Knicks with Harden's 61 points. And that's the other thing with Harden's 61 points. They beat the Knicks, who are terrible, by 4 points, and Harden had 61 points. You'd think that if you scored 61 points and you won by 4, or you'd think that if you scored 61 points, you'd win by 30. Or I don't know. It's just not impressive to me. Am I being like unobjective here? I'm sure that I am a little bit, but I don't know. The what Harden's doing is impressive from a scoring standpoint, but it just seems like after that quote about him wanting the MVP award, it just seems like he's just like fucking, I'm going to take all of the shots. I'm going to just hold the ball the entire game, and I'm going to give the league no other choice but to give me the MVP, because I just go on this unbelievable record-breaking. I mean, no one's done what he's doing right now as far as scoring goes. He's averaging like fucking 36 some odd points per game right now. Harden is averaging 36.3 points per game so far this season. If it wasn't for such a terrible start, I mean, I think he would obviously, I mean, to a lot of people right now, Harden's the MVP just because of the scoring thing alone. And I couldn't agree less. I think that the MVP should be it should be what it is. It's a most valuable player award. And Harden is just the most impressive scorer that maybe the league's ever seen. And that's where you got to give the guy credit. He's certainly unlocked the cheat code as far as scoring goes in the NBA, and he's playing in an era that scoring comes everybody is putting up. The Spurs and the Sixers last night, which was a great game, 122-120 was the final score. 121-101 Hawks Bulls, 118-107 Hornets Grizzlies. I mean, it's just now it's routine for teams to score in the 100 teens, 120s. In most, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games last night. Only 1, 2, 3 of the 20 teams that played last night scored under 100 points. The Pistons and the Pelicans, the final score in that game was 98-94. Blake Griffin had 37 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists. He does not qualify this week and the past couple weeks for the MVP matrix because they are 21-26 They're under 500, and I just can't give the MVP or any consideration for MVP to a star player that puts up really great numbers, but just isn't good enough to have his team in playoff contention, or to even have a winning record. So, but back to the overall point, like teams are scoring is never been higher in the NBA, and Harden's certainly possibly the greatest scorer the NBA has ever seen. And I don't even like making statements like that because it's such a small sample size. He's doing this really incredible scoring run in the last month and a half, and he's certainly going to cool off. He may still average over 30 points per game this season, but I don't think it's going to be above 34. I don't think he's not going to sustain this kind of scoring run. But I don't think that makes you the MVP. I don't think because you score 36 points and you blow everybody else out of the water in points per game, that doesn't make you the MVP. You're supposed to be the MVP is someone who brings all-around value to the team. So let me get in now, since it seems like that's what I'm talking about the most. Let me get into the MVP matrix for this week. So the MVP matrix is a overall statistical matrix made up of 9 categories: points per game, assists per game, steals per game, blocks per game, rebounds per game, plus minus, 3-point percentage, field goal percentage, and the win percentage of that player's team. And I think that these statistics are certainly a telling tale of the overall value that a player brings to a team, not just on offense, not just scoring, but impacting the game in a number of ways: passing, rebounding, steals and blocks, which is fucking defense, and then how efficient of a shooter you are, field goal percentage, and then 3-point percentage, because the 3-point shot is so important in today's league, and then plus minus, how well your team does with you on and off the court, and then the win percentage, because that's the goal. You're trying to win games. You're trying to put up great stats so that your team can win games. And so Harden finished first in points per game. So each player, there's 19 players in the MVP matrix that qualified. 19 star players whose teams were over 500 that qualified for the MVP matrix this week. And that's last week's sheet. Okay, so points per game. Each I need to fucking write this down so that I can just say what the MVP matrix is each time and then get right into it. I feel like each week I just stumble through what the fuck this MVP matrix is. I feel like it's difficult for you people listening that aren't looking at what I'm looking at to kind of grasp the whole MVP matrix thing. So all the players are tallied up 1 through, in this case, 19 for this week. That's how many players were eligible for the matrix this week. And Harden was first in points per game, Curry second in points per game, Durant third in points per game. So Harden got 1 point for that category, Curry 2, Durant 3, so on and so forth. So I do that for every statistical category. I rank the players from highest to lowest for each category, and then Harden would get 1 point for points per game. But then in assists per game, he's third, so he would get 3 points. And then steals per game, he is third again, so he would get 3 points again. You get the idea. So then you total up all their points from each category, and the players with the lowest point total are in the top 6 of the MVP matrix. So for this week, Giannis Antetokounmpo is still first with 53 overall points, and that is slightly up from last week's total of, what did he have last week? 52 overall points last week. And then second for this week is Kevin Durant at 61 points. Third is Kawhi Leonard at 70 points. Tied for fourth is Steph Curry and Nikola Jokic at 75 points. Tied for fifth is LeBron James, James Harden, and Paul George at 77 points. Joel Embiid rounds out the top six with 78 points. So there's a little bit of movement from last week. Last week it was Giannis Antetokounmpo first, Durant second, so that stays the same. And then Curry and Leonard were tied for third. So Curry drops down, Leonard moves up to third. Curry drops down, tied for fourth with Jokic, who was alone in fourth last week. And then Paul George and LeBron James last week were tied for fifth, and Harden was sixth. So Harden moves up to tied for fifth with those two. And then Joel Embiid moves from tied for eighth with Westbrook and Simmons to up to sixth place. And then Irving is seventh place. I didn't accumulate anybody past Kyrie Irving because I want to keep it to a top six and just not even give the other people any name, any fucking whatever you call that. So any pub, any press here in the old I Can Do Anything podcast. So that's the top six for the MVP matrix. I made a bunch of notes on some of the other changes, like within each of the statistical categories. In points per game, what am I trying to say? Westbrook and DeRozan swapped from 11th and 12th. Jokic and Butler swapped 15th and 16th. Durant moved up 1 point from 11th to 10th in assists per game. Other than that, assists per game is the same as it was last week. Harden in steals per game moved up from 4th to 3rd. Kyrie Irving moved up from 7th to 6th to tied for 6th with Oladipo. Giannis Antetokounmpo moved up in steals per game to tied for 8th with LeBron, Jokic, and Simmons. Lillard moved down from 10th to 11th, and DeRozan moved up from 11th to 10th. Also in steals per game. In blocks per game, James Harden moved up. So with the production that, with this streak that he's on, Harden has moved up in a number of categories. He moved up in steals per game, making himself third. He moved up from 7th to tied for 6th in blocks per game with LeBron and Jokic. Paul George moved down from 8th to tied for 9th with Kawhi Leonard in rebounds per game, and Kyle Lowry moved up from 19th to tied for 18th with Damian Lillard. Kyle Lowry moved up in plus minus from 3rd to 2nd. Curry was first. Antetokounmpo and Lowry are now tied for 2nd. Durant 3rd. Paul George 4th. Plus minus Embiid and Leonard swapped places from 8th and 9th place, and then Jokic and Lillard swapped places. Jokic is up to 9th, up to 9th, and Lillard dropped down to 10th. 3-point percentage was the most movement was in 3-point percentage. Paul George moved up 4 places from 8th to 4th. Curry was first, Tobias Harris second, Kyrie Irving third, and then George fourth. So he moved up 4 places. Durant fifth. Butler dropped down 2 places from 4th to 6th. Harden moved up 2 places from 9th to 7th, and then Lillard, Leonard, LeBron James, Victor Oladipo dropped down 5 places to 11th place, and then Jokic and Lowry swapped 12th and 13th, so Lowry 12th, Jokic 13th, and then the field goal percentage, Giannis Antetokounmpo went up from 2nd to tied for 1st with Simmons, and then LeBron 2nd. Durant moved up from 4th to 3rd. Aldridge moved down from 3rd to 4th in field goal percentage, and then Kawhi Leonard moved up from 7th to 6th place to be tied with Jokic for 6th. Embiid moved up 3 places to be tied or to be 8th place. Curry dropped down 2 places to be 9th place from 7th. And then there was some movement in the win percentage. Oladipo moved up. He was tied last week with the Nuggets and Jokic, so he moved up 1 pace. Yeah, that's about it. So the MVP matrix, again, Antetokounmpo with 53 points, Durant with 61, Leonard 70, Steph Curry and Jokic tied for fourth at 75 points, LeBron James, James Harden, Paul George at 77 points for fifth, and Joel Embiid moved up 78 points to tied for sixth. Joel Embiid last week was tied for eighth with Simmons and Westbrook. I think I already said that. But that's the MVP matrix for the week. A couple other things I wanted to talk about from this week. The All-Star starters, right now it is 7:19 p.m. on Thursday, and the All-Star starters have more than likely been fully announced. Let me go to the NBA homepage. It looks like the top story is the All-Star starters that were just announced at 7 o'clock. So my All-Star starters that I picked were Kemba Walker, Kyrie Irving, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, and Kawhi Leonard. And then in the West, I picked LeBron, Harden, Durant, Steph Curry, and Paul George. And then the first time I voted, instead of Paul George, I picked Anthony Davis. That was in the first round of voting. And that's who the NBA All-Star starters are. Well, I'll start with point guards. So Steph Curry and Kyrie Irving, and then Kemba Walker and James Harden, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, and then LeBron James and Antetokounmpo, and then Joel Embiid, and I guess Durant would be the five in this scenario. So I picked the NBA starting lineups for the All-Star game exactly how they ended up being. So, that probably means that that's how a lot of people picked them. I think that that's pretty fair. I think that that makes the most sense. I think the top vote getters... Let's see. The Los Angeles Lakers star once again headlines the list of stars at his side for the 68th All-Star game. He joins Milwaukee's Antetokounmpo, the top vote getter in the Eastern Conference. And so the Eastern Conference... So I think that the top vote getters from each conference will be doing the draft, which will be February, the second week of February on a Thursday. I forget what the date exactly is. I want to say it's February 7th. Yeah, it is. February 7th at 7 p.m. is when they'll do the All-Star starters draft. I guess the entire All-Star draft. I'm really excited about that. I think that's going to be really fun to watch. So if that's how I understood it, it'll be Antetokounmpo and LeBron James picking their teams for the All-Star game, and those two will battle each other as top vote getters. I want to move now to the college side of basketball. Michigan State beat Maryland on Monday. I'm going to quick pull up the box score from that game. It was a really good game. Cassius Winston is great, man. He is really good, and he's just a really great all-around point guard. Like he's scoring the ball really well. He gets guys involved. He facilitates the offense perfectly, and I think Izzo really, really loves him. So Cassius Winston had he only had 14 points. They got a really, really balanced scoring effort from a lot of guys. Kenny Goings had 14. Aaron Henry started in place of the injured Langford, who has been out for a while now. He's been out since the game that I went to on December 29th against Northern Illinois. He played at the beginning of that game, and then he must have got hurt in that game because he didn't play very much in that game. And I didn't even notice that he wasn't playing because it was Northern Illinois and they blew him out. But Aaron Henry played well. He had 12 points, 4 assists, 6 rebounds. Nick Ward had 0 points in 14 minutes. I think he got hurt a little bit at one point in the game. But, for them to win 69-55 with no points from Nick Ward was a really, really big game for Michigan State. That's a really important win, to be able to win with Nick Ward not scoring any points, as he's a really focal part of that team, especially a big part of their offense. Matt McQuaid had 10 points. Like I said before, Winston had 14 points, 7 assists. You never see the numbers in college that you do in the NBA. You just see a really well-rounded box score. 14, 12, 10, 14, 10 for Xavier Tillman off the bench. I really am high on Aaron Henry. I think he's going to be really, really good. I talked last episode or last week sometime just about this not being like a really, really, it's just not a really powerful recruiting class that Michigan State had this year. But I really, really like Aaron Henry. I think he's going to be a really good player. He shot the ball pretty well from the field for the most part, I think, in this game. And he attacks the basket really well. He's really springy. Maryland had 3 guys in double figures. Fernando had 12 points, and Morsel had 10, their starting point guard, and then Aaron Wiggins had 15 off the bench. Maryland didn't play very well. I think it was kind of a combination of Maryland not playing very well and Cassius Winston managing the game really well. But Michigan State is off to a really, really great start to the Big Ten season. They're undefeated in Big Ten play and on top in first in the Big Ten. Let me pull up the Big Ten standings again. For the beginning of the season. So Michigan State is now 8-0. Maryland drops from second to third. Michigan moves up from, I think, third to second. I think they just swapped. And I don't know when Michigan State play. It's got to be coming up soon. I really hope it is. Right now, Michigan State is beating Iowa 21-20. I need to turn this thing off and turn that game on. But when the hell is Michigan State? You know what? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. When it comes, you can count on me talking about it. I'm going to turn this thing off and go watch some college basketball. Michigan State versus number 19 Iowa. I believe the game is in Iowa, so Michigan State will certainly have to play well against a ranked Iowa opponent who I haven't watched at all this year, but on the road, this is going to be an important. You got to win road games against teams that, Iowa's ranked, and the Big Ten is really, really strong this year. But you got to win. You got to win road games against Iowa, who is 5th in the Big Ten. This is going to be an important game come the end of the Big Ten conference season. So thanks for listening again to another. Thanks for listening to me rant about James Harden's scoring spree not really being that impressive and putting him tied for 5th in the MVP matrix. And I know most people probably have him 1st or 2nd in the MVP standings, but in my opinion, Giannis Antetokounmpo has had a very, very well-rounded, very consistently great NBA season. He has played well the entire year. His team has been on top of the NBA the entire year. And that, to me, makes you the MVP. And if he continues to play this well, in my book, he's the MVP. And Harden's just a really great scorer. Thanks for listening.